Greetings from Asheville, North Carolina, where we are currently standing in the rain but having the best time.
That's right. It's 37 degrees. We couldn't have picked a worse day to come here in terms of weather. But Asheville, North Carolina is a great city. We're finally so happy to be here. We got a couple others coming at you in the next few weeks. Today, however, we have a very special episode.
Of course it's special. You say every episode is special, but I actually think this one is extra special.
This one is especially interesting because we have the host from People More Interesting Than Me podcast. It is Michael Strumsky in the hot seat on Skiptown All-Stars today. We hope you enjoy it.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Hey listeners, ever wonder what it would be like to blow up your comfort zone at the tender age of 50? Well, we did just that. When our last kid went off to college, we hit the road in search of a new hometown. Now we bounce from city to city and bring you along for the ride. This is the Skiptown All-Stars podcast.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Skiptown. We are pretty psyched today. We have a guest.
We do.
As promised, we are continuing to evolve the show, and that includes incorporating the thoughts and personalities of other podcasters. And today is no exception. We have Michael Strumsky from the People More Interesting Than Me podcast. I tripped over that saying it in the car. I was practicing. But
it is a mouthful.
It is.
But it's such a great title. I love it.
It really is. However, I do take a little bit of issue with it because we were actually on Michael's show not too long ago. And frankly, I feel like he's a pretty interesting person.
Oh,
so,
I know.
Fact,
I agree.
I think he should have called that episode People Less Interesting Than Me. For being honest.
Yeah. So, Michael, we have a new rebrand for you. People less interesting than me.
We do. So let's bring him into the show now. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Michael Strumsky from the People More Interesting Than Me podcast. What's up, Michael?
Hey, guys. How's it going? Thank you very much for having me on. And you guys say all that interesting stuff, but not many people invite me on the show, I think, just because of the name of the podcast. And I agree. It probably wasn't the best choice of title when I first started off, but I guess I just leaned into it when I started booking guests and stuff like that.
I think it's clever.
I do too. I actually like the name of the title. I'm just saying for our specific episode, it's a little bit of a misnomer. But we appreciate it being on your show. We had a pretty great conversation there, and looking forward to this one as well. Why don't you tell everybody in our audience a little bit about yourself?
So in my normal job, I'm actually a COO now of a company that does kind of government protection now. So it's like one of those standard engineering firms.
Sure.
Which I can't really talk about much, but the cool part of it is, which I can actually say, is we do attenuation. I don't know. I should probably explain that part, but we do sound and RF attenuation, which is kind of blocking like radio frequency waves and sound waves, like similar to like the sound studio, or radio frequency waves, and the fact that like anything you have electronic, like your phone, your computer, stuff like that, we can kind of block any signals or anything like that from escaping or entering.
Okay, Michael, I have to tell you, I experienced this one time, and
we're at the Russian restaurant.
Yeah.
I knew you were going to tell the Russian restaurant story.
It wasn't Russian. It was Armenian.
Oh.
And whenever I was around the restaurant, because it was right next to my daughter's dance studio, and by the way, the food was fabulous, and the guys were always really super handsome and so friendly, but when I could not use my cell phone. So every time I was near the restaurant, my cell phone was not in use. It was like a black zone. I don't know what you call it.
They're jamming our signal.
Yes, they were. And I called James one time and I said to him, it doesn't matter where I am around this restaurant, I cannot make a phone call. And he's the one who said, they're jamming the signal. And then we find out later on, like there was an FBI raid there, like there were guns. It was, So it wasn't too far off base, right, Michael?
Yeah.
They probably were jamming my signal.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, if you've ever heard of it, like a Faraday cage, it kind of looks like the old timey version is like people like touch their hands to like those glass globes, and the electricity comes off. Or I don't know if you've ever seen the movie. What's that movie?
No, I know exactly what you're talking about.
But there's like a famous movie where Faraday's in the movie. They have Tesla. It doesn't matter. The Illusionist or The Prestige. They're both like the same movie to me.
Yes.
They are like the same movie. You're
it's
right.
one of them. I've seen both.
And they came out at the same time. That's the worst part. Even though one is very much better. Is
the one with Ed Norton, I think,
I was going to
very
say,
much better.
Ed Norton and Christian Bale were in the same one, or was Christian Bale in the other one?
Separate ones. It was...
okay. I like the Ed Norton one, I think.
Really?
We may need Phil to dial this up for us. Yeah,
I see Phil working the magic right now on his laptop.
Phil's tapping.
So The Prestige is Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman. The other one is The Illusionist with Ed Norton.
Oh, okay.
And what year did they come out, by the way? Because I'm pretty sure they came out like within a 6-month radius, which was
2006, 2007.
Okay.
It was probably 2000. Late. It was probably November 2006 and February 2007.
You know, there are guys on the couch at home saying, "Honey, didn't we just see this movie?"
What do you mean?
Yeah.
Like they saw one of the movies, and then 6 months later, she's like, "I want to watch this movie," and he's like, "We just watched this movie."
Absolutely. I think you said that. I think you said that. Yeah. But anyway, so go back to explaining what you do. I'm so sorry. We went off.
No, you guys are fine. So what we do is we do shielding from like...
You're protecting us.
Yeah, that's what we're protecting information. And that's really to the extent that I can go because, but like I started off there when I was like a kid. When I say, a kid, I was like 21, 22. Now I'm 34. And it's really weird nowadays to stay at a company since where you were in college, but I've been there for almost like 11 years.
Wow. Okay. That's awesome.
I'm one of those people who, I'm going on my life trajectory and there's nothing that like bumps me. It's like the complete opposite of what people are doing today with like the 2 years and then they leave for a new job and a better salary.
You are the anti-millennial.
Yeah, my dad is like one of those salt of the earth, wake you up at 6 a.m. On Saturdays type guys.
Nice.
Yeah. So I am just a reflection of what he is, but like he's still working and he's like
so he's
76.
Okay, so was he at the same job for many, many years?
Oh yeah. He was a air compressor mechanic, which is like one of those what would you call those? Like blue collar workers who like, gets a job across town, works there for 3 hours. You don't know when he's getting home. Yeah. And like when he's getting home, he's like not happy at all just because.
It's like everybody's dad back then, right? Like everybody's dad.
Well, yeah. Everybody's dad or anybody, especially anybody's dad who had to go out and deal with the general public all day.
And work a blue collar job because those are very hard.
Yeah, and everybody thinks they know better than you.
So Michael,
and then, sorry, keep going.
I was going to ask you, what kind of degree do you need for this job that you have?
You know what the funny thing is with that is like, and I was just going to say this, but just with any blue collar dad, what do they want their children to do? They want them to go to college, get a degree where they don't have to be a blue collar worker. So I wanted to be an architect, but then I got a dual degree in engineering. But to be fair, you don't really need those degrees, in my opinion. Like
you are an underachiever because an architect degree is 7 years, and you have an enginering degree. You have both.
But he had a dual degree.
I just said he's an underachiever. That's like insane.
You made up for some of the leaving architect school.
No, did you leave architect school or did you complete?
You never went.
No, so I went to Virginia Tech and they had like one of the best programs in the country at the time. So I didn't get into the program when I, got into college. It's like one of those things where if you work at it for like, like half a year and then you reapply while you're in the university, you might make it in. And I got good grades, not like 4.0, but like 3.8. And that was phenomenal for me. And I thought I aced the interview, didn't make it in. So it was like one of those moments where you're like, do I try again or do I, settle for something you don't want? So you never know. I could have been an architect. I could still be an architect.
Okay, Michael, I'm laughing because most people who don't get into their major, or the kids that we know, including our own, they'll settle for a communications degree.
Yeah.
You went for engineering. You settled. Your settling was like everyone else's big, huge like reach.
Yeah, I was a chemical engineering major for 2 years, and I ended up in TV. So that should tell you everything.
Was that because everybody says OChem or something like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, my high school guidance counselor told me that because I love science, I should probably consider engineering. And that was the most direction I got when I was that age. So, yeah, but after 2 years of being in it, I said, well, I don't know. I can't really envision doing all this all my life. But you, however, on the other hand, decided you wanted to not just do it once, but twice. So that's cool.
So isn't Virginia Tech, though, like that's a really competitive school?
I would definitely say it's a competitive school on the East Coast. But if you're looking at it, well, not with like MIT and...
No, it's right up there, though, isn't it? It's like in the top 10 with like engineering and math and science.
Yeah. And nowadays, you know, they go by like sector. They might be, you know, good in electrical or like not so good in mechanical. But yeah, I mean, like I was saying, when you guys are on my show, it's a phenomenal place to live. Like the synergy and the community and the locals like made the university. Like engineering was a horrible part of my life. I can remember like all night. There's this one night I remember, and this is like what you do when you're in like the worst parts of your life is you remember every second like they're like a week. And I had pulled an all-nighter and I had done an electrical circuit, which is like on those breadboards. If you see, they kind of look like Braille, but they got wires coming out of them. And I had to ride my bike in the rain with this electrical box like this big. And it was just like, how did I get to this point and why am I doing electrical engineering? But overall, I'd recommend if anybody, and the reason I probably got the degree is the fact that engineering, I feel like opens you up to so much stuff on a creative scale, and not many people think about it that way.
Right.
Because I mean, look, nowadays it's much different than 10 or 15 years ago. You can have like a CNC router in your house. You can have a 3D printer, you can have a resin printer, the stuff you can do at home has totally, you know, like has gone above and beyond what people could do. You could even say 5 or 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, that's so true. That's so true. So tell us and the listeners, you have a very, my guess would be high stress, probably job, or just really high functioning job all day. Like you have to be on your toes for what you do. What made you want to start a podcast?
Yeah.
Because it is work, Michael. So you work all day and then you come home and you do the podcast in the evening. And what, like, you're not busy enough? Like you have a couple of kids already. We know this, you're married. What made you decide to take on an endeavor such as podcasting?
I didn't immediately go to podcasting. I actually started doing like audiobooks, like very small audiobooks. You've never heard of the people because they're the same type of people. And this was during COVID. So, you know, everyone was trying out 5 different hobbies.
Yeah.
And so I started doing audiobooks and I found that very tedious because it was like, you're listening to your own voice, because I'm doing the editing. And as anyone who's ever done editing is because they hate themselves. They can't do it.
I think there's a nugget of truth to that.
Oh, Michael, we will be editing the show and we're both like, oh, did I just say that? Oh, cut me out. And James is like, did I really? I'm going to cut this whole thing out. I can't believe I said it.
There have been moments where I wanted to throw half of an episode onto the editing room floor.
Or he'll be editing and I'll be in the other room listening and I'll go, oh my gosh, your co-host is horrible.
I wonder if there'll ever be a day where people who podcast will just be able to use some type of filter that completely doesn't sound like their voice, and then they can edit it quite well. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
Oh, this topic isn't that bad.
Can we change the voice to like, I don't know, like it'd be funny if we could change the voice to
Demi Moore.
I was gonna say like Al Michaels, like the sports commentator.
Michael, yeah. Super excited.
Yeah. Hey guys. Okay, so go ahead. So you're editing your own audiobooks.
Yeah, wait, what kind of content though are
Yes.
we talking? Was it like fiction, nonfiction, technical manuals? What?
So a little of all of those. Like I did I think a electrical like theory manual. I had done like an offshoot of like the 4 Agreements, if you've ever heard of that book.
Oh, yeah.
And then some girl in, I don't know where she was from, maybe Texas or something, had done like a post-apocalyptic book. And I found that like the hardest and the funnest book because you have to come up with voices.
Yeah.
But the worst part of that is you have to repeat the voices. Like you've got to remember like the 5 or 6 characters.
You got to be consistent. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the hardest part.
That would be really hard.
It was, and it was quite stressful because you're recording this book, and for however long you've got to keep this consistent. But you're doing like, I think the book ended up being like 4 hours, and not only are you doing the editing, listening to yourself, but you're listening to the voices you do. And you're like, what am I? This is supposed to be a woman and I'm sound like a baritone here.
I know. You're like, I'm going back to making bread.
So basically what were you doing?
Exactly.
You were taking books and just turning it into an audiobook? Like explain to our listeners what you were doing with these.
So yeah, there's this Amazon market where people bring their books, and obviously these do not need to be like high level top shelf books. And they're looking for people to basically, they can't do it or they don't want to do it. So they have people do it for them. So people audition for these books. They listen to some of the auditions because they give them a little excerpt. And then they make a contract with you. And then you can either earn a flat fee or royalties. And most people do it depends if it's a very good book, they usually do the flat fee. And if it's not a well-known book, they'll usually do the royalties. And like I didn't do a crazy amount. I did maybe like 2 or 3, but I was doing auditions. And like you said, I didn't have much time, but this was during COVID where, everything was going a little bit slower. So I had a lot more time on my hands.
Right.
But so I started doing that for a bit, and then I was like, why not do a podcast? And then the other reason I kind of started it, I was having kids during COVID. My first kid was born 2020 November.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I had actually come back from a business, I was in Germany for work. And I just made it past the COVID lockdowns, which was in March. So I was just like amazed. And then I found out, and then, I was thinking like, I didn't mention this yet, but I don't like to mention this on my podcast, and I'm fine with putting it on other people's podcasts, but, I was diagnosed with MS in like 2000, I want to say 17. Because I like to joke, my wife gave it to me because we found out literally after the honeymoon.
Oh, wow. Holy cow.
Wow.
Wow. I didn't realize it was that long ago, I guess. When we spoke before, I thought it was more like 2019, 2020. So.
Oh, yeah. I must have messed up the dates because that's how I can always remember, because it was like we had come back from a cruise or something, and I was sleeping on a couch. And my hand had fell asleep, but it hadn't fallen asleep. It was like numb from, just one of the numerous symptoms from the disease. But basically I had like one of those epiphany moments where I was like, okay, a podcast would be a great project. I would have a ton of video, and I don't know if you guys go on Reddit or anything like that, or message boards or stuff like that. But when you go on stuff like that and you have like an autoimmune disease, you never see like the fun stuff, but you always see the worst case stuff. And that stuff just makes you kind of, at least it gives me drive. So I was thinking, let's do a podcast. Let's put like a bunch of videos on there, and just start. You have so many like interesting friends. Like, why don't I just start interviewing them, and then I'll start tracking down other people? Because, and as I've learned after all these interviews, everyone is interesting. You just have to kind of bring it out of them.
It's true. Yeah, I believe that.
And people who say they're not interesting, they're just hiding something. That's
I know.
The
They're the ones you have to watch. They're the ones who are the most interesting, right?
They're serial killers.
They are.
What do you? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and that's why I just wanted my, as depressing as this sounds, I wanted my kids, if I wasn't the same person that I was when they were a baby, that they at least had something to look back on and at least hear me, and they could see me, that I was actually somewhat competent back there.
Right.
But
well,
yeah, that's basically it.
Obviously, I mean, look, that's like gutting to listen to, and
and
then at the same time, it's like you handle it with such grace and just a matter of factness. Even when we were on your episode, on your show, talking to you beforehand and everything, beyond inspiring and what you're trying to do just for your children and everything. I mean, you've put together a fantastic program. Like, you've put together a great show, and tell us a little bit about how that works with this backdrop of your diagnosis and everything going on while you're still working a job. Why now you're COO, and I mean, you're juggling a lot. You got a lot on your plate, my man. So why don't you speak to that for a second? Yeah.
That's probably like a constant thing that's always in my mind, is like, am I being a bad father? Am I giving enough to like work? It's like I'm on I don't know. It's not even a seesaw, because there's so many vectors to it that it's kind of like what do they say? 3D chess, but a 3D, or 4D, 7D seesaw or something. But
yeah,
I don't know if you ever had this issue, or either one of you guys had this issue where it was, you were contemplating like, how do I make myself like a good parent while still trying to set a good example, or making sure my mental health is great, or like, for example, my parents, like I mentioned, my dad, he's like, salt of the earth, always was a good supplier. So is my mom was a kindergarten teacher, and my wife's a kindergarten teacher. But
I love that you married somebody that has the same profession that your mom had.
And it's not a weird thing. I just want to state that it's not like a,
what is
like
it,
a
an
type.
Oedipus? Like, is that what it is? Like when you,
I don't think.
No, I know. I'm saying, of course it's not.
Technically it's different, but yes, along those lines.
Your mom was great. It's great. And I love kindergarten teachers. They're always so sweet. So your wife is obviously really sweet.
And she's too dedicated. I could talk about that forever. Like, she'll go to kids' games on the weekends.
Oh my gosh, she is
and
dedicated.
I'm like, you really shouldn't do that, because then you'll have to do it for everyone in the class.
You got to set the bar too high.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So continue. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I'm sorry.
You're talking about your dad and your mom.
And I don't know if your parents were like this, but they're just so dedicated that they didn't really do any self like hobbies. They never really did anything. And I know it was a completely different time back then.
Yeah.
Maybe they probably had no time for hobbies. You know what I mean? Like, today's standard of, I think, childcare is, I wouldn't say it's too high. Maybe it's where it needs to be, but it's just the fact that where's the time?
Right.
If I had to sum it all up, like, when do I sleep?
It's true, because look, more than one person, you're obviously younger than we are. So you are a millennial. We are Gen X, but our generation, our friends say the same thing. Our parents ignored us. It was just a different time. So we were more involved as parents. dealing with that right now. You're an involved parent, your wife is, so it comes up with, how do I sleep? Because my guess is the minute you get home, you're not watching TV, you are engaged with the kids, you're giving them a bath, you're reading them a story. They go to bed at like 8 or 9. Maybe you have a little time with your wife to chat, and then it's 10 o'clock and you're exhausted, but you probably have to pay the bills. I mean, because you are an involved parent. You're not just coming home and sitting down and watching TV.
It's so sad how you described my life in so little words.
Michael, I described my life, okay? I've described my life. I described James's life. Yeah, that was our lives too.
The only thing different between us is our kids have flown the coop, but, I wish I could tell you the parenting stops after a point, but it doesn't. So it's just the stakes become strangely enough even higher.
I know, but we do get more sleep. So Michael,
we do get more sleep.
You will get more sleep. You just have to wait till they're 22.
Yeah. Me too.
But anyway, so you were talking about like parenting, and your parents didn't really give themselves much self-care, most likely, and didn't have time for anything that interested them. So this, I take it, is just your own interest.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely started off as, like one of those things where it's like, oh, I'll try it out for like 20 episodes. And obviously you guys know the statistics that it's like most podcasts don't make it to past 20 episodes or something like that. Maybe that's not even the thing.
No, it's true.
10 is 10.
Is it 10?
I think we talked about this, Phil. You said 10. I said 21. So yeah, Phil. I think Phil knows. He is the podcast doctor. So it's 10, Michael.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And it really depends what kind of podcast, at least from what I've seen. And it's all about consistency is the biggest thing.
It is.
For me, like, guess was really what the driving thing was for me. And the hardest part was finding people that were interesting. And we talked about this, I think, on our last podcast, about making sure that like the people that you bring on, that you're, in my point is, they're actually interesting, they have content, and that they're not like, not to put anybody down, but they don't really know where they were on January 6th, to put it that way. You know what I mean? Like, right. You want someone.
Yeah, you want somebody who's, traceable in a good way, right?
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Michael, it definitely begs the question. I mean, come on, you have to tell us at least like your top 3 most interesting people, and do not include us. We know that we were.
He wasn't going to say that.
We know we're number one,
but
Michael.
It's good you let him off the hook.
But honestly, like, okay, I guess who was the most surprising? Like, wherein you learned so much more about them than you had anticipated going into the podcast episode with them.
So I guess one of my favorites was, and to be fair, I love the ones where you're completely surprised that they email you back, because I thought when I married my wife, I would never be ghosted again. But like, it's like that consistently. Like, you'll send an email and you won't even know if it made it there.
It's so rude. I don't know why people just can't respond. That is so obnoxious.
I have a theory.
Oh,
and that is,
what is it?
My theory is when you start podcasting and you drop your first 5 episodes or something like that, you're initially bombarded with all these podcast services, promoters and all that other stuff, that it like
gets
to
lost.
The degree, where it's just, you don't trust anything that comes into your inbox. So,
okay.
So there's a little bit going on.
There was a level of that when Michael reached out to us. I remember Jenny, she helps us with our Instagram. She said, what do you want to do? This podcaster reached out, and I said, well, let me see if he's legit. I did say that.
Yeah,
that was the first thing I said.
Yeah.
So, and you're legit.
You are.
But you think that's why, like, Michael, out of what do you think the percentage is of returned emails?
If I had to guess on how many I've sent, and I don't go like too crazy. Like, I mean, I used to send crazy ones back in the day.
What's crazy? What do you mean? Like to Joe Rogan?
Crazy is, so there's this one comedian, and you guys probably know who it is. I had been following ever since he was doing like YouTube videos, but now he's like a huge Donald Glover. Do you guys know who that is?
Oh yeah, I know who that is.
Of course.
I see him in my
And
feed,
I've been to
yeah.
and I've been to like 4 Childish Gambino concerts, and I'm, you know, like I follow this guy, and I tried to write like a couple of them, and, you know, like nothing back. Actually, no, I was able to get to his agent.
Ooh, that's pretty good.
Those computer engineering skills, and I probably sent like I've probably sent maybe like 12 emails back and forth with them, but you know how it is, like, oh, they're busy on set and stuff like that, and,
Right.
you know, and I totally get it. Like, these people are super busy. Why would they? It's not worth it to them, and I get that. But that's just one example. And I mean, you try, and sometimes I've gotten really good ones. This one's a small musician that I grew up with called Eric Hutchinson. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. But I was amazed to get that.
Oh, that's awesome. Tell me one that was just super surprising that you were like, okay,
So-
well, they're going to talk about gardening, but then you find out that they were, you know, like something else that was in a former life. Like they were, you know, a hot air balloon
Yeah,
instructor.
they
or
survived
something.
a bank heist
Yeah,
or something like
did
that.
you find anything, anyone that you walked away from that you thought about 2 days later and you could not stop thinking about their story?
So one of the friends I grew up with, and I had heard this story, but and you guys are probably familiar. Anybody's probably familiar with this. You don't really ask your friends like the stories that like kind of like really wreck them or really define them. You've heard them from other friends, but you never come out and ask them. So even better, I had him come over and we recorded the episode. It's actually one of my first episodes I did. His dad. So he's originally from Tanzania. And at one point he came over with his dad. And he found out that his dad was the first person to, what's it called? Hijack a plane in Canada.
No way.
And yeah, he was telling me.
What an achievement.
So the funny part with
is
that
an
is
achievement.
Canada never, like, he did it in Canada, obviously. And you know, Canada, they're a little bit nicer than America. They didn't have hijacking laws back then. So he served like 2 years for hijacking a plane. And guess where he flew it? He flew it to Cuba. And so he was chilling in Cuba for a couple of years once he hijacked the plane. So he was in dealings with like the Black Panthers up in New York. So at one point they did like a robbery or something like that at a bank.
That's
So
crazy.
I know you got to listen to the episode. And he basically drove to Canada, but really nice with the most polite hijacking. So he let everybody get off the plane besides the pilot before they went to Cuba, obviously, because they needed to refuel to get all the way down to Cuba.
Okay.
Right.
So they get to Cuba, the pilot gets to go back. So basically there was no,
You just needed a lift.
He just made everyone get off the plane and he needed a lift. Yeah.
exactly.
That's insane.
Okay, so that's a crazy story. And so you had heard this about his father growing up. And then when you had him on the show, he divulged everything.
Yeah. And another funny thing I did not know is his father's actually a twin. So,
I wonder if the other one gets stopped and questioned all the time.
and you want to hear the craziest thing? Do you know, like, and the FBI was on him like a lot, but they finally, when did they picked him up? I'm trying to find, they arrested him September 10th, 2000. It was 2001, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, they picked him up that day. Like, and that's the crazy part of it, where it kind of flew under the radar. It was
Holy
never
cow.
really on the news, which was the crazy part. That's when it didn't happen that date. That's when they
were
like,
found him.
yes,
So how long was he living in Cuba before getting
not long.
caught? Oh, okay. So they caught him right away.
Because-
Oh my gosh, so this is like fairly recent.
Yeah,
It's
this is
within
this last 20 years. This
I
is
thought this
insane.
was back like in the 70s where
No.
they're just like, oh,
no,
we're
it
gonna-
is.
Wait, so was he
Cocaine
friends
or
with
whatever.
you when his dad got arrested?
No. So he was really young. So when he went to Cuba, then he left from Cuba and went to Tanzania for like a bunch of times. That's the part in between. That's why it does take place in the 1970s.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. There are so many layers to this story. And that's why if you look at how long the episode is, it's like an hour and a half. But that was one that like, you know, like you hear the story and you have some of the finite details, but there's like so many layers. And he's such a good friend too. Like I've known him most of my life.
So that was a
one of those
podcast
things.
episode where you had him on the show and you were like, oh, we're just going to like chat. And then all of a sudden he tells you everything about what really happened with his dad.
Yeah. And, you know, like a kid, like, well, I say kid, but I was just like waiting for the listens to come in. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be so famous. Like from this episode, that's how good I thought it was. And I'm like looking at it and it hits like 60.
Oh, we all have those heartbreakers, Michael.
Yeah, we know.
all have
We know
those
that feeling.
heartbreakers.
I know.
Look,
Everybody loves that click count.
we were on a podcast with a famous comedian, Bert Kreischer, and we thought ours was going to skyrocket. We're like, that's it. We're going to go viral. No, I think we went from like that episode, like
I mean, it's one of our 3 highest rated episodes ever.
with only 600 views.
No, it's got more than that, but it wasn't the you're thinking, oh, given his audience and everything, you're thinking we're gonna reach 5 zeros on our views, and we didn't get nearly that many.
Okay, Michael, to make you feel even better, I have a friend who's a comedian. And he did a podcast, he and another comedian, and his partner was on Joe Rogan's show. So this is a good story. Misery Loves Company. So when his partner went on Joe Rogan's show, his podcast partner, my friend was like, that was it. We knew it. We're going to go viral. Like, we're legitimately, that's it. We're going to get sponsors. Like, Amazon's going to make a show for us. Like, all of this. He said they didn't get one new listener. Wasn't even a subscriber because they're not on YouTube.
Yeah.
They didn't even get one new listener from that Joe Rogan episode. I'm like,
That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy? How could that even happen? He says, I don't know. To this day, I still don't understand how he was the only person on Joe Rogan who didn't explode.
Did he even release the show?
He did. Isn't
Yeah.
it crazy? They released the show, and he said he didn't get one new listener.
If anything, that's more nefarious than anything. It's like somebody's trying to sabotage him.
Right? You would
Yeah.
think so. Like, how did he? Yeah, I said to him, how did it work out? And he's like, oh, not one new listener. He said it was so sad. We were like, we're already like opening up new bank accounts. This is gonna go. Yeah. Uh-huh. So I'm so sorry
That's
you didn't
crazy.
go viral, Michael. That's a great story.
I love that quote. I'm sorry you didn't go viral.
I know. You put that on your I work in television, so whenever we get a nutty sort of network note, we will print them out and put them on our wall. And so you can put Denise's comment on the wall.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you didn't go viral.
So speaking of that, my wife, she always has this real like one funny joke like every month. And when I say funny, I mean like it's like funny. And she comes up with a rap lyric, and it's about, I guess, butts or anything, but she would get, she doesn't listen to this, so that's perfect.
That's awesome. Our family doesn't listen to ours either.
Well, she doesn't, for some reason, she used to love trashy TV. Now she loves trashy podcasts.
Oh, okay.
Like The Toast. I don't know if you're
Oh, of course.
And maybe they're not trashy, but they're more like, like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's dynamic.
But,
it's entertaining
Yep.
for the right audience, for sure.
I'm trying to, and we put it on the fridge, the quote. What is it? Did you build that or did you make that? And it was just talking about your butt. Like, were you born with it? Or it's funnier, I guess, with my wife, but.
So, have you had your wife on the show as a guest? Forgive me, I don't remember that.
Oh, no,
seeing
you're
that
fine.
In your catalog.
So when I did ChatGPT, like when I was asking it questions, I thought it was very weird if I had a robot's voice to do it, which is kind of counterintuitive for the episode, but
Right.
She voiced the words for it.
Oh yeah.
But other than that, no, I haven't. It's so hard to do it with friends, like interviewing, because I feel like it gives you like a handicap because you know so much about the person. That you really have to think about yourself as an outside, like completely like separate and think of your audience. And I feel like With my wife, that would be kind of a, you guys know. So you're probably the experts at that kind of giving, always thinking about the audience when you guys are talking.
Yeah, we got to be careful. I mean, to not sort of devolve into inside baseball stuff, like stuff that is between us, that where there's a tendency to just naturally assume that your audience knows what you're talking about because both people in the room know what you're talking about. But yeah, I don't know. I think what has been helpful is that we started out our podcast sort of exploring new places and being there together, but seeing it through our own different set of eyes. So I think for us early on, we sort of were just able to quickly take that common knowledge stuff out of the way quickly.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's a good assessment. Yeah. So sometimes if we're doing inside baseball, like if he says something that's an inside joke, I do have to explain it. So yeah, you're right. It's so funny, Michael, that you say this about friends and interviewing them and being careful, because it's true. We've interviewed family and we have interviewed friends, and those are usually exhausting because we do have to do a lot of planning our questions and really explaining, because we know the backstory, and that can be not a good episode.
Yeah, it can be. And you're also, at times, depending on what stories you want to tell, you're skirting the line of like, how much detail does our friend actually want to give on our podcast or what have you?
Because you still want to be friends after this.
Exactly.
Or
and so
you want to have a somewhat decent Thanksgiving.
Exactly. It's like, if you don't want to answer this, we've said it when we've had people on that we're, intimately familiar with. There have been a lot of moments where it's like, okay, you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but we're going to ask, kind of thing. And so,
Michael, how many episodes have you streamed now?
So I've got about 63.
Nice.
I'm really trying to hit that 100 at least before I've been thinking about possibly like rebranding and doing kind of a new one, because you guys you didn't, I would say, inspired me, but if I do redo it, I love the fact that you guys told no one that you guys were doing it. And I feel like that gives you such a kind of like a blank check at doing whatever you want.
Yeah.
Because,
We just actually talked about this with Phil. There is something very freeing about not telling people what your next step is. Because there's no 2 cents.
Yeah,
everybody's got 2 cents to tell.
For us, it kind of fit the fabric of what the show would ultimately become, because we weren't really asking permission to put everything up for sale or to leave LA or to, not even really have the guarantee that I could continue to work remotely or what have you. We had reached a point in our lives, I think, where it was kind of critical mass, where we just said, we're doing this and damn the consequences. And, there have been some days where we really appreciate what we've done, the favor we've done for ourselves. And then there have been a few days here and there where it's like, oh, we've cursed ourselves, but for the most part, I just, especially when you start creeping up on age 40 and then into 50, it's, we live in an age where medical science can keep us alive for another 40 or 50 years if we really, take good care of ourselves and are also lucky enough to make the cut, right? But I think what's important is to still take that chance where you kind of sort of have the balls to still do it. You know what I mean? And before if we were pushing age 60, I don't think we would say, oh, let's sell everything and move to, Saint-Tropez or whatever. I don't know, maybe we would. I don't know. Who knows? But,
so what are you thinking, Michael? Like, okay, so you get to 100 and you're going to maybe rebrand, or like, what are your, like, okay, so what's the goal, I guess? I mean, obviously you are leaving a legacy for your family, but in the immediate sense, because you're recording and you're creating content and you're spending the time doing this. So what do you want to see from it before 100 or at 100?
To be fair, like, I mean, obviously everyone, wants to be famous, all this stuff. But behind that, I would say I just want to, I don't know, interview more interesting people. And I feel like that's just like any game you play, you've got to kind of build up at least your techniques. You got to build up your contacts. And it really comes down to how many people are listening to you, where you can kind of pull larger people. And I don't know. I feel like I need to have like a niche like you guys have. And obviously they come for the guests, but the guests are bringing a new flavor to you guys. They might find out something new about you, but they come back for you guys. You guys are like the joy that the reason they listen.
Well, I think that you have really great guests. I mean, I've listened to quite a few, and I thought the girl who was the farmer, I say urban farmer. I don't know if I'm using the correct.
You could
terminology.
say it's urban because it's in the city.
Yeah, but I mean,
that's
like,
fine.
I don't know if she considers herself a farmer or if she has some more fancy term for it. I like that episode quite a bit, and then I like the one, I think it was the very first episode that you had. It was like. I remember he was adopted. He was adopted. I remember, and he found out that he was adopted or something like that. I thought the story was so interesting. I mean, obviously I listened to it a while ago, but I thought that I think the guests you have are definitely engaging.
Yeah, and I think the format is definitely slice of life along the lines of like NPR or something like that, where it's like, I know the format of your show, and I know that you are the host and you're going to interview somebody who's interesting every week. And it doesn't matter, if they're a beekeeper or a mechanic.
That's on the list, by the way. That is definitely on the list.
I love that.
You know how hard it is to get a beekeeper to get interviewed?
Is it really?
I know one.
You do?
You know a beekeeper?
Absolutely. He runs one of the largest ones here.
Wait, we got to put him in touch with Michael.
I'll hook you guys up, all right?
No, that's awesome. No, that'd be great. And I think Joe Rogan had one on there, but obviously that beekeeper is like, top tier beekeeper.
Oh yeah.
Okay, now
he's like pulling honey for Burt's Bees and all that stuff.
Oh yeah.
It's so funny.
Ooh, that would be a good one too, Bert.
There you go. Bert.
Yeah, get Bert from Burt's Bees.
Have you seen his story they did a documentary on him, how he basically sold the rights, like his likeness and all this stuff. And then I think he sold it for like 600 or, like a really small amount to the lady who was working with him.
No. Oh, really?
It's definitely, look up the article. It's not worth the documentary.
I heard about this. He sold it for like nothing, right? And obviously it's turned into this now. Yes.
I think the lady turned around, sold it for $26 million to, I think Target owns actually Burt's Bees. That's why you see those large displays. But yeah, she turned it around probably within a couple of years after he sold his likeness and the company. And I was just like, wow. And obviously I think he was trying to sue or something after that.
Right. To get more money. That's tough though, once the deal is done.
Especially when you see your face.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's, it comes up once in a while, like on, sort of business newsletters I get or what have you. Like every once in a while I see a blur, like how they've kept that likeness, because for whatever reason, when you look at his face, it personifies like natural ingredients,
it kind of does.
something earthy,
Santa
something, exactly. So
he's like the Newman Zone of bees.
Yeah, they're never going to change the font. He's totally the Newman Zone of bees. That's a great analogy. Oh my God. So anyway, we'll get Bert from Burt's Bees on your show. And who else? We need you've already had a hijacker. You could use a couple bank robbers or something. And,
That's true.
Mix
a bank robber would be nice.
Let's go the true crime variety.
Oh my gosh, there you go.
People more incarcerated than me.
Exactly. that would be a good little like special.
A spin-off.
I have like 3 different people on at the same time. And they're all incarcerated, and you have to guess what's their
what's their crime?
Yeah, what are you in for? What are you in for? And today's "What Are You In For" segment, we have Tony. Tony, say hello to the crowd.
And then you hear the thing, local call from Montgomery County. Will you accept the charges? Yeah, exactly.
Yes. There's a Tony. Local call from, there's a Tony. Pick up.
And then they
Oh my
ask
gosh.
if I put the money in the commissary before they start talking.
Exactly.
But anyway, going back to complimenting your show,
Yes.
I find that it's really like I'm oh my gosh, I'm such a I really feel some of the most well-known podcasts like Serial and all that have done a great job of maybe Serial's not. There was another one, I forget the name of it. It was also sort of a true crime thing, but it was spanned over 8 episodes and some crime that happened, some murder that happened in Georgia.
S-Town?
Yes, S-Town. That's the
I
one.
love S-Town.
Oh my gosh, you see my head snap?
Yes.
Yes, that's the one. It was just like just the funky little town and the little dude who, was killed and everything. And it was like, I don't know. I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. So,
Where are we going with this?
I'm complimenting his show. He gets those kind of people on where I'm like, this is interesting.
I mean,
Fortunately,
to be
none
fair,
of them have been murdered or anything, but
Oh yeah, that's true.
yeah.
So
Yet.
how is your wife with the support of the podcast? Does she do you guys discuss it much, or is it really just your thing, or just tell me?
It's so in the supportive area, she is the most supportive. Like if I say, oh, I've got a or lately I've done some calls. When did I was Denmark, for example. I did a what kind of farmer was it? It was what do they call those? A vertical farmer, like an indoor farmers who do all that stuff. And the call was at 5 a.m. And I've done a couple of those with like Dubai, and she's like super helpful because that's when we start to get the kids up. Or if I have a call, like at 8 p.m., she's like, she's not begrudging or anything like that. But when it comes to like creative stuff, like, hey, any ideas on like suggestions and stuff like that? Like creativity is not like her best thing, but everything else besides that is her thing. Like,
Aww.
So she's supportive in the fact that like, supportive as much as she can be. But other than that, creative wise, listening, she's not the biggest fan. I'll put it that way, just because, like I said, she needs like junk food in her ears when she's not around kids.
It's funny. So that's her escape. So you're more origination for the show. She's obviously
she's the cheerleader.
Very helpful execution. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Michael, here's the biggest question at hand. Have you had a troll yet?
Oh no.
Oh, come on.
Man, I wish I could have a troll.
Yeah.
I wish I could have a
He's
troll.
so much more likable than we are.
I know he really is. We have to I'm going to troll you.
No, that'd be fine. It's sad that you say that, because I was thinking like, man, I probably get a lot more reviews and a lot more listeners if I faked a troll. Like I wrote a bad review on one of my things, because, I have like I have 5 reviews on Apple and they're all 5s. And when you look at that, you think, okay, this is either very small podcast or like
wife,
this guy
his mom,
is getting
his auntie,
clickbait.
his brother.
Yeah, exactly. Like this guy, nobody's actually listening to this guy. So I was thinking that, and I was like, what's the proper, like, do I give myself a 3 or a 2 or something like that to properly kind of deflate the stats?
No, you have to keep the stats high. You want to do that, but we have to like think of a good troll for you, like on Instagram or something like that. Like we have to come up with a good. We have to come up with a good troll.
Just leave a comment like, I've heard more interesting.
Yeah, or it's very well titled.
Yeah,
Something like that.
Yeah. This podcast is aptly named 2 stars.
Yeah.
No, don't screw
that sounds perfect.
Don't screw with your
I know
Apple
you're going to mess with
Podcasts.
you. Yeah, you don't want to mess with that.
Don't mess with Apple Podcasts. But we'll find a troll for you on Instagram. That'll take it
Perfect.
to the next level.
Okay, so let me ask you
Perfect.
this question. Was there ever somebody you had on the show where afterward you
Wanted to delete the
regretted
interview?
it? Yes, you regretted it, or you were on the fence, or maybe didn't run it?
Oh, that's a good question. Didn't run.
So I had a couple of those. One of them, I had a friend who, she started working she was working with Facebook, and then we had done the whole interview. And she's like, oh, by the way, I don't think we can air this. Like, I have an NDA and all this stuff.
Oh my God.
And I was like, oh man.
Are you
okay.
kidding me?
And I was like, that's fine. You're my
you
friend.
You just wasted my time.
I know. But like you said, friends, you kind of have to
Why would she
put on kid gloves.
Agree to do it, Michael?
I don't know.
I think people get cold feet afterward for sure. Don't you? I mean,
that was she should.
I worked on a documentary once in television. So one of the first shows I ever did, it was a documentary for Discovery Channel. It was about the canine units it was called Dogs of War. And they used it, specifically the canine units in Vietnam, but they also highlighted some other ones. And there was this guy who came on and did an entire interview and had poached details from the other guys that we had interviewed for the show. So he was basically stealing details of his own backstory or war stories or what have you.
Okay, that's different.
And it wasn't until, I know, but I think there are people that like get into it so far in and they get worked up and then all of a sudden they're like,
oh, she forgot she worked at Facebook.
And then you call in the next day and you're like, you know what? I shouldn't have said that stuff I said last night. I was 3 glasses in,
Oh God. Okay. So you had to chuck that one. What was the other one?
So the other one and I maybe I talked with you guys or somebody else, but I find some of them on Reddit, like the interesting people. And I think I asked once, I really needed a deadline. It was probably like a Wednesday and I had to turn it around by Saturday. So this person, I don't know. It was just.
Oh, say it.
It was just one of those situations where they were kind of saying off-color comments and like racism stuff.
Nice.
Oh, no.
That's always a fun card to trot out in front of people you don't know.
And the worst part, if you guys remember, like the fluidity of the editing, you got to make sure that the amount you take out still flows from beginning to end.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, like.
So did you use the episode?
I did use the episode, but it's a lot got taken out.
So it went from like an hour to like 40
12
minutes. You gave it 12. I gave it 40.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, like, I'm obviously thankful that they would do the interview, and you guys have that issue if you're interviewing friends or family. Like, have you had that issue where you take out a bunch of stuff and they're like, why did you take out the part about, I don't know, my flamingos in the front yard? I was describing them and how they're organized.
I don't think
is that ever an issue?
Not with interviews. We did have an episode we killed.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, around the holidays last year, we did an episode with our daughters just to catch up. And the Zoom was so clunky. You could tell they weren't into it.
Yeah, we killed it.
Yeah, we killed it. And they were like, where's the episode? And we were like, we killed it because it sucked.
You know what, Michael? We haven't interviewed enough yet for that to happen. And that's just the truth.
That is the truth.
We've only interviewed, I've interviewed my brother. I interviewed, we had our friend on, Patrick. And
we've done a lot of Ask a Locals, though.
We've done Ask a Locals, but they know that they're smaller in nature. So when they do the Ask a Local, they know it's only going to be a 15 to 20 minute clip that's only for YouTube. So that getting cut, they know is going to happen. But no, we haven't had that actually happen yet, Michael, because we haven't interviewed enough people, I think. No. So we haven't had that problem yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I don't know. We haven't had that problem yet. But I could see that being a problem because if somebody's on the show and they're listening back to their interview with you and they're like, why did he cut that? But you can't have everything. I mean, you just can't.
When they come back to us, they're like, why did you keep that misogynist stuff I said in there?
Yeah, exactly.
Turns out,
condense it out.
Turns out one of our co-hosts is a woman. So it was in poor taste. Read the room, bro. Read the room. 2023.
Well, we really appreciate you being on our show and taking the time out of your evening to sit with us and talk about your show and why you started it and, you know, what you do for a living and your family. So it's really nice that you did that. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem, guys.
Absolutely. And, obviously we are inspired by not only the legacy you're leaving your family, but just, again, the way you go about it.
Yes.
Your interviews are incredible. Your interviewing skills are great. Your voice is really, I mean, you sound like an audiobook kind of person. And so voiceover artist. So, we always appreciate every moment we can spend on your show or ours. And I can't wait until we, hopefully we get to do this again real soon in the future.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Maybe 2024.
Yeah, that'd be great. But so I hope you have a really successful 2024. And hopefully, we will get to see each other again and do another show and just catch up. It would be fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
sounds good.
Best of luck with your health, with your family, with getting to 100 episodes and the spinoff, and obviously to any incarcerated people you may encounter along the way.
Yes.
We obviously wish them the best,
exactly.
the best of luck as well. Thank you so much for being on the show with us, Michael. Why don't you take them out?
Empty nest, full tank.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.